So today we're going to take a look at dreaded fractions. Now it starts off really easy, but be careful. Don't blink because suddenly it's going to get a little more complicated. The first thing is how to handle common denominators. You have to have a common denominator for addition and subtraction. So in letter E, our common denominator of 8 makes it easy because now we just have to combine the tops using integer rules. 7 minus 12, which is equal to -5. When you have a negative fraction, keep the negative up on top. It's the easiest way to handle it for future operations. You could also have variables in the top of a fraction. Same deal though, the denominators have to match. And in this case, a plus 3a, which happen to be like terms, so we can say 4a, and you're allowed to reduce that just like you would any other fraction to 2/3, okay? And the a is still attached on top. Incidentally, you could also have written that as 2/3 a. You'll see that sometimes in future questions. Letter K, we have a common denominator of 4m. Still the same deal. You keep that denominator the same. You add the numerators, 14, and you can reduce here also, giving you 7 over 2m. Nothing more to do with that fraction. You don't try and change it to mixed or anything like that. And letter L looks ugly. It's still the same thing. It's just m plus 1 on the bottom, and you add those tops. And remember, they're not like terms. You can't do anything to combine them. So be aware of that. Your question stops at this point. Nothing more to do. Now, in the next section, we're taking a look at some really basic grade 7 questions. You have you don't have common denominators, and you have to get a common denominator. So the easiest way to get a common denominator is multiply those two denominators together. It doesn't always get you the lowest common denominator unless, in this case, there are no common factors. So the first fraction, I'm going to multiply both in top and bottom by 5, and the second one multiply top and bottom by 6, so that my lowest common denominator is going to be 30. Now, back in grade 7, they made you rewrite this as two separate fractions. We're going to end up skipping this step for future questions because right away you're going to wind up with numerators that basically are on their same denominator. So we can go directly to 25 minus 18 on the top. Anyways, you'll see that in the next question. 7 over 30 is my fraction. When the denominators have a common factor, like 4 goes into both 12 and 8, it means that you shouldn't just be using 12 times 8 as your common denominator. In this particular case, I'm going to use the common denominator of 24. If you ever get stuck on this, you take the bigger of the two numbers and usually you try doubling or tripling it, and most times that gets you your common denominator. So in this case, 24 is going to be my common denominator. As I said in the previous question, I'm just going to rewrite this as one denominator right away. I'm going to multiply the first fraction by 2, top and the bottom, and I'm going to multiply the next one by 3, top and the bottom, and that's going to give me 10 plus 21 right on the top. So saving a little bit of space, and when those denominators start getting uglier, you're really going to appreciate just writing a single fraction. You add the tops, and remember, the denominator just carries through. Letter H, the only reason I wanted to talk about this question is when there's a common denominator, it's just the product of the two, there's a little trick you can use here. And that's basically the product of the two is going to be your new denominator, and you can multiply up to both sides to get a 2 minus a 3. The other feature about this question is you could wind up with a negative numerator, and you would just leave it on the top. You don't have to bring it out to the front. Yeah, that concept of like cross multiplying kind of thing, it can work with numbers also that are bigger, except that your common denominator here would wind up as a 54, which you can actually use a smaller common denominator of 18. Question 3, section 3 here is got a little bit of an irritation where you have a negative denominator. Try not to let that bother you. Just remember that negative is not an exponent. The negative is just saying it's a negative number on the bottom. So in letter D here, that 8 is negative. So you rewrite the fraction with the negative on the top. So that 8 on the bottom and 3, it's a negative fraction. We're going to write that on the top. Now in the case of the second fraction here, I've got minus a negative 5/6. So that can just be rewritten as a positive 5/6, right? The two negatives are going to combine to make a positive. My lowest common denominator is going to be a 24. right? You try doubling or tripling that bigger number, and the first fraction is going to have to multiply by 3 top and bottom, and the second fraction is going to multiply by 4 top and bottom, and pay attention to the signs, 11, positive 11 over 24. That's how you would do those questions. So just a reminder, if there's a negative in the bottom of the fraction, just move it to the top, and it's not an exponent rule that's happening there. Okay, now we moving into some algebra. We have variable numerators. The top has a variable. Well, it still follows the regular rules of algebra. My lowest common denominator here is going to be a 15. I'm multiplying the top and bottom of the first one by 5 and the top and bottom of the second one by 3. And that's going to give me 5a plus 3a. And yeah, they're like terms, so you can combine them together, 8a over 15. And always look to see if it reduces if it can. The common denominator in my next one is going to be just a 30. And here's a case where, since it's the product of the two numbers, I kind of can do that 5w on the top left and 12w on the top right. Just saves for a little bit of thinking, right? We don't want to have to be thinking too much these days. Over 30. Letter J, we have common denominator of 30 again. And so we can use that same trick. You're multiplying 6 times s. Make sure your s doesn't look like a 5. And 5 times negative b, so that's negative 5b. Nothing to do there. You can't cancel the 5 with the 30 or the 6 with the 30. They're not like terms. You just stop at that point. Sorry, guys, can't go any further. Letter K, the common denominator here, I'm going to try doubling the big number, is 18. They both go into 18. So my first fraction is going to have to multiply by 3, and my second fraction is going to have to multiply by 2. Negative 3h minus 2k. And same deal, you have to know you can't go any farther with this question. There's no like terms, and you're not allowed to reduce only part of the fraction. The 2 and the 3 would both have to reduce with that 18 with the same common factor. All right, a couple more sections here. If you have a variable in the denominator, same rule, your common denominator here is going to be xy. You try multiplying them together, and using that trick I mentioned before, you could just multiply up, and this is going to be y plus x. Cannot do anything to reduce this. Letter B, same deal. My common denominator is mn. And this time I'm not going to use the trick. I'm just going to show you what happens. I would be multiplying the first fraction by n, top and bottom, and I would be multiplying the second fraction by m, top and bottom. And that's going to give me 3n minus 4m. Question D. Now, you have a common factor in the bottom here. So you don't have to have a 9 BC as your common denominator. You could go just 3 BC. Right? Because 3b is going to go into that, and 3c is going to go into that. So what you do is you're going to multiply that first fraction by c, top and bottom, and you're going to multiply the second fraction by b, top and bottom. Now, despite the fact you could say, hey, I could reduce them by 2, well, you can't because the bottom doesn't reduce, and there's no like terms, you stop. The next one's as easy as a, b, c. Your lowest common denominator is going to have all 3 of those numbers. You can multiply the first fraction by c. You can multiply the second fraction by b. You wind up with 2c minus 4b. It is going to get a little bit more complicated, maybe with exponents and stuff, but for now, let's get the basics here. You have to multiply both numerators by some sort of variable to make them match. One last question that I want to talk about is, like I said, the increase in ugliness. I got to find something that the 15 and the 6 both go into. Well, yeah, 6 times 15 is 90, but you could just use 30 as a smaller number that works. JKN, well, I'm going to need a couple of Ks. Well, not really. If I just have a J and a K and an N, I don't need a K squared. I can just multiply this first fraction now by a J, and it's going to be a 2J. 2J, got to squeeze my work in here, and then this is going to be multiplied by 2J, so that's 14J. And my second one is going to be multiplied by 5n, right? That's the missing, whoops, that's the missing factors that we need, 5n top and bottom. So hopefully when you put this together, you're going to be able to not be so scared of fractions, I suppose. And at the end of it all, by the way, look to see if there's anything that divides top and bottom. In this case, nothing happens. And yeah, we'll go into the next bunch of questions in class. Thank you and have a great day.